Well, welcome to our latest edition of Tecman Talks Dynamics. It seems to have been a little while since we got together. I'm joined with James Crowder today.
Hi guys.
It's almost 12 months, I think, since we recorded the first episode of this, so it's an anniversary of type, but we haven't recorded one for ages.
I've stepped out for, I think a few other people have been on, so yeah, it seems a while since I've done one.
Well, it's good to have you back. I know we've been really busy, but
that's an understatement.
Just an understatement. But as we come to the end of the year, we thought rather than looking back, we're going to look forward. Dynamics is on a real push at the moment, but there's a lot of momentum and a real roll. So we thought we'd have a look at what we can expect and a few things that we are changing as we go into 2022. So we've dropped a few subjects down, and I thought I'd throw that to you and say, where do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm expecting kind of 2022 to be a continuation. I don't think there's going to be a major change, but the trends that we've seen in 21, the move to SaaS, the move to extensions, has just started with a momentum that's just, I would say, unstoppable. I was amazed when Liz came and said, do you realize 23% of our Business Central customers are on SaaS platform now? That was just, considering we've been building the on-premise customers for 20 plus years, and suddenly 2-3 years in to SaaS, and probably 18 months, 2 years since it became a credible platform, that almost a quarter are there. And we're starting to see some of the bigger customers now evidence. Just this morning I was talking about final tests for a migration from kind of PaaS to SaaS. They didn't have a bad platform on PaaS at all. There was lots of specification, and they're saying their testing on SaaS is faster than it was on PaaS. The performance problems with Microsoft do seem to have gone away. I guess that's they haven't gone away on their own. I know the guys at Microsoft, there's a few, Jens and Dimitri, and a few people who've done an enormous amount of work to solve this out, but they do seem to have got on top of this, and now what they told us was the only really performance issues on SaaS are where there's some rogue code in the mix. And that's where we're putting a lot of work in to kind of educate everybody about the performance guidelines and what they need to do and how they need to structure it so that we don't hit those performance issues. So that's a real, if there's one big win, and one thing that I expect, it's more and more customers to get SaaS ready and then make that migration.
I saw some numbers yesterday that we got given around the way that people are moving off PaaS and onto SaaS. So I've seen like the charts, and I'll share these with everybody later, but our PaaS usage has actually plateaued. It was been growing non-stop. It was almost doubling year on year in the last 3 years. Now it's plateaued out, but our SaaS growth is just going up and up and up and up, and that shows as people are moving off the PaaS platform, or we're not putting new people on because the SaaS platform is now ready to take them for almost day one. Yeah,
and I think we've got a lot of obviously experience now of SaaS from all shapes and sizes of customers, all types. There's been a couple of recent outages that we should talk through because those were wow, okay, and they were probably a bit of a shock because we hadn't had many since I can remember one previous to the couple that we've had. I think the max was 4 hours.
Yep.
But 4 hours is a hell of a long time if you're dependent on your system. But I think we have to put that into perspective of saying, okay, Microsoft got it wrong. They, I believe the diagnosis was that it was an authentication problem, so it was an issue with logging onto the system. If you were logged in already, you were okay. If you were trying to log in fresh, then you couldn't get in for a while. They deployed an update to fix something, and it caused problems. Can you expect any platform in the world not to have those types of problems? I'm not sure anybody can claim that 100% success rate with that. I think, hopefully they'll learn from it again. It won't happen again. I would say for the people who say, well, I want to be on-prem because of that, well, actually, guys, you're a lot more vulnerable on-prem, and for those types of issues, it can be a lot longer actually to get it back if you're on-prem. We don't, we do our best, but we don't have the hundreds of engineers that Microsoft can throw at that type of problem. And to roll that back worldwide in that kind of time frame, actually,
it's pretty good, wasn't it?
It's pretty good results.
And I think they've got those experts. It was an authentication issue. No doubt they're doing something around additional security and all the things that those threats never go away. For to be on premise and take that responsibility yourself or with a partner, that's quite a brave move. And I agree with you. We see there's always been outages. Systems have always gone down. These guys have the platform, the resilience, the expertise to get it back up around the clock. So it's not ideal, but it's a better
actually
than the
what they
opposite.
did, Liam, was they rolled it back to the way it was before, and they did that in that time frame for everybody. Now they couldn't roll the data back because in effect people were still logged into the system. I've already said, right, if you're still logged in, you could still operate. So you could put some transaction through. So they couldn't do that bit back. They had to roll just part of the system back in a way that would make it work. Now, actually, that's phenomenally difficult to know exactly how you're going to do that. And, I'm sitting here thinking, if we when we were doing upgrades on prem, yes, typically we'd arrange a time and we do them at a time and date. But if a customer came and said, I want to roll that bit back, but not the rest of it, the preparation, the kind of just organisation you have to need when you do the upgrade in the first place would mean that the upgrade itself to have that capability would take significantly longer. And so typically, we don't do that because clients, dare I say, don't want to pick up the bill for that extra time for just in case. So we would, we could do it in a different way on prem. I think it's part of adapting from a single user system into a multi-user, multi-tenanted, as it's called, system. There's a few different things there, but the resilience, I think if you looked over a 5-year period, my bet is downtime on prem versus downtime in the cloud. So far, the cloud would have a pretty good ratio.
Yeah, I know when we were doing far more stuff on prem, and I was probably a lot more involved technically, the thought of you said of ever having to roll back and install a backup, it was, your heart used to increase, the heart rate went up.
You hoped it was there.
He hoped it was there, and that is with Microsoft, and we know that they don't leave much to chance with that. We've never had an issue when data's been corrupted or anything gone wrong from their side. So I think again, it's the better of the two evils. It's not ideal.
Well, can we talk about another evil that's hit this year that actually, I really hope we don't see in 2022, and that's ransomware taking down on-premise systems. That's just that's where you get the heart-stopping moment when somebody rings you and says that now. And we've had 3 instances of that, I think, in 2021. One of the first might have been back in 2020, maybe last year, I don't know. But when they kind of come on and say, actually, we've been encrypted and a ransom demanded, and that's affected our Business Central system, nav system as well. And then they say, actually, we found we haven't got a backup. And we had one just a couple of weeks ago now where they were ringing us up saying, do you guys have a backup? Because we've turns out we've lost it all. And these are not small organizations. Putting their core, all of the data back together again is a huge job at immense cost. So if anybody out there is listening to this and you haven't done a test restore of your on-premise system since kind of, maybe you changed your working practices because of COVID and not being able to be in the office every day, who's taking those tapes off-site? If somebody does get inside your system and lives there dormant for 4 months and then exploits, what would your backup plan be? How would you survive that? If you're not thinking that through, you're naive, because we've had organisations in the tens, dare I say, hundreds of millions of pounds that are looking at recreating their data. Manufacturing organisations, one was just crippled them, and if they hadn't had a huge parent group, they'd have been long gone.
Yeah. And of course, a lot of people will rely on replication on another drive somewhere else, maybe off-site, but once it's encrypted,
But that
it just replicates
exploit goes
straight across.
It doesn't protect you.
So you need to have that backup on a tape or on some format where you know it's safe from back last night.
That's where I increasingly wonder, because I saw this weekend, there was another exploit that was part of something that would, I read the description of how you exploited it, and actually it was so easy I could have done it. And it was like, just feed the right data into the right web form that's on a web server, and actually that gives you remote execution capability, so you can start what you like, if in effect tell that remote server to go to this site, download something and execute it, which is what you need to get some nastiness inside your systems, and then it will just proliferate across. Once it's inside your kind of firewalls and protection, it can just go across. So these exploits are coming all the time. You're going to have to sit there and spend a lot of time and effort patching and just keeping up to date with all of this. Just saying we've never had a problem, so we'll never have a problem, I'm afraid, is how the 3 customers that we've got, that was symptomatic of, I think, of where they were. But you really don't want your management coming to you and saying, when are we going to come back up? And you saying, I've got no idea, it's a retyping job, and we're looking 3 to 4 months, because that's what it takes. And what do you tell your customers in the meantime? It's horrific. So that's that where I know some people say, well, it's much cheaper on-prem than it is in the cloud. Actually, look at the total cost and look at protecting your on-prem system. And I think I've never heard of a ransomware attack where the customer was based on Azure.
I haven't heard of one, and
I think you probably pretty quickly would, because it would be pretty
credibility would go missing. But that's where Microsoft bring that extra layer, don't they? They've got security experts, they've got software that they use, which is available to us all, I guess, to a point, but at a great cost, and we don't have those teams of experts constantly
setting
reviewing.
up things like 2-factor authentication and all of that stuff is kind of a few minutes top work. Whereas if you want to do that for on-premise systems, you've got to kind of work out how that works and go and spend money. So the cloud's, I don't think the cloud's significantly cheaper, but when you factor in everything that you should be doing on premise, I don't think it's more expensive either. And certainly, SaaS, it's just there, it's all done for you. We don't even have to do it. What we need to do for SaaS is changing from what we needed to do for PaaS, which I guess brings us on neatly to the topic of managed services, doesn't it?
It does. So you're absolutely right. Although we're sticking it in the cloud and a lot of stuff is taken care of, there is still some tasks, some jobs, some routines you need to look at. The rate of upgrades that we know coming down the line now with Microsoft, almost on a monthly basis with smaller releases, you need to have somebody helping you. We would suggest around getting that in a position where it is just happening and you rely on it.
Yeah, and that's continuous, because those updates, we had the release of version 19, 2021 wave 2 in October. We're already on 19.1. That's hit in the last week or so. 19.1 changed something around warehouse shipments that meant that actually some of the integration with courier software, we had to make a slight change to work. So we've got to make sure that when you update to 19.1, that extension, which is from AppSource, also comes in as well at the right time, so that effectively that still works through. So that's where that's where again the scale of this works. So yes, customers, we've developed a kind of set of services that we're calling self-service this year. That's what we've tagged it with, where customers say we want to do much more of this ourselves and take responsibility. We're fully on board with that. If that's what you want to do, that's great. We'll support you, and we can be the consulting services when you've got those questions and your expertise reaches its limits, or you want to do something new. We can provide consulting services around that. But the opposite side of that fence is kind of fully managed rather than self-service, and that's where the managed service comes in, of saying we will check. And actually, for us to do that at scale, I talked about the 23%. Now getting towards the hundreds of customers on SaaS, we can discover in one set of testing what we need to do to quite a lot of the others. This is where standardized product, and certainly obviously we've got our own Clever Dynamics products that we're very on top of what changes need to be made, because we're testing 60, 90 days before release, what we need to do with those. But even the more and more third-party products that we're seeing, it's very rare you don't get a client on SaaS with 2, 3, 4, 10 third-party ISVs, making sure they all still work together. Microsoft aren't going to do that. They're going to make sure their stuff works. We need to make sure the rest of the stuff works, and that takes a bit of work, but we can do that at scale. We can discover, and then we can apply it to all those customers and bring that expertise to play. So I think that's we've got some great telemetry. We've got some great APIs now that just pull us back, so we know exactly, even if you install something as a SaaS customer from AppSource yourself, the following day we know about it, and effectively we can add it to the things that we're checking when the next update cycle comes into play.
So we've obviously formalized that. We've been doing it for customers over probably the last year or so, haven't we? Since we've seen the move to SaaS, we've now formalized that. We've documented what we are doing. And
huge amount of learning. I mean, I remember sitting 2 years ago, and probably 3 years ago now, when SaaS first launched and it was financials only, and saying this is the sort of things we're going to need to do. I was naive. What we actually need to do is a fair bit more than I thought we needed to do, if I'm brutally honest. And also the tools, things like the telemetry. So, the telemetry is fantastic, and Microsoft has been bang. There's a guy called Kenny, respect Kenny. You were saying this 18 months ago, and I was like, yeah, Kenny, you're talking about telemetry again. I'll get round to learning it one day. But now, when a customer goes onto SaaS and they open a page, and that page takes longer than a defined period of time, we can have a little alert that comes through to say, this customer has tried to open this item card, and it's taken 4 seconds. Okay, and so we can look at that and we can see the trend on that, and we can go, ooh, okay, something's going on there. Something that we've added in from ourselves or a third party, is starting to make that a bad experience for the customer. And so we can be ahead as part of that kind of managed service. We can be ahead of that, where we're contacting you and saying, posting that sales order seems now to be taking an inordinate amount of time. You're trying to pull back this information, and this query is taking longer than we think is an acceptable period of time. What have we added onto those pages? We can look at that and we can say, well, actually, we think we need to make this change to tune that so that actually that performance continues. And that sort of stuff. This is the sort of stuff that SAP Enterprise. If you were on SAP with 10,000 users, you'd have a team of people sat there in an enterprise company,
just monitoring,
just doing it and running it, and that will be the SAP team, what they did. Now, actually, we can bring that down to a customer that's got 5 users on Business Central in the cloud, and if you actually 50, 60 users on Business Central, the mid-market, which is where SaaS is now starting to gain real traction. That can make your organization run much smoother, because we can get ahead. We can be, for the first time probably, we don't have to wait for the support call. And the first support call, we'll say, well, what were you actually doing? Could you just remind me? We actually know which page, the page number, all the rest of it, of what you were trying to do, and the order you were trying to process come to that. And users, with due respect, I'm not, it's not their job to record enough detail to tell us what they can do. Users, another great change that's happened that we're starting to use is the error message that comes up on BC SaaS has an extra little link in it that allows you to download a load of information that you can supply to us as a support service, so we can go back. It's called a stack, a copy of the stack, as we call it. Now, that's every process that was going on your user session and some of the data that's associated, so we can see exactly what that field to was set, even if it wasn't on the screen, that we think is the difference, and why did it get there, and so on. So we got much better tools to do
analysis,
it's not kind of this error has to happen 42 times before we actually work out what the cause was, and actually can fix it. So I think going forward, we're going to be much on it. It means our support team, the knowledge in there, we're having to spend a lot of time upskilling and giving them some, new capabilities. It's where, that's going to see increasing divergence between the people who are on the later versions of Business Central and the older versions of Nav. If you're back on, just talking to somebody who's back on Nav 2017, and, yes, we can still do what we've always done, but guys, the experience you're going to have is what you've always had, and it's going to be, I have to say, it's natural that the people who are doing that, the support for that, are going to go, well, if you were updated, we'd be able to do a much better job for you. And that's a little bit frustrating when we know we could have solved that problem so much quicker, so much easier, and given you a much better experience if you're on the later versions.
One of those classic things you used to say on support was, can you recreate the error?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the first thing we want you to do so we can track it back. And if that information now is available to us on the later versions, you don't get asked that horrible question, and you always feel an idiot when you try and recreate it as a user and it doesn't go wrong the time you're on the support call.
The dependent data, because it's not necessarily the data you're typing in. I always use the analogy of you have to have the exact same quantity in every bin in your warehouse and every outstanding warehouse transaction, to determine why should it not pick from that bin. And it's a nightmare to try and recreate that exact point in time situation with data. Impossible, really. So all you can do is keep guessing until you kind of find that problem and can go at it. So look, there is some real I would say innovation from Microsoft that's coming, that's now there, but you need to be on BC 19, and even BC 19.1 has got better capability than 19 had. So this is where it's moving on all the time, and I think we're going to see two groups of people. I think the partners out there who are still saying, look, stay on your existing version long term, we'll keep doing a bit of development for you to add this, add that, whatever. Try adding some of those capabilities. That's not a developer sitting there in CAL created. That's in the core platform. You can't add that. So
you use the gap then though between where that customer is compared to where Business Central is. The jump becomes too big to make. It's a re-implementation. You can't upgrade. See, all you're doing is kicking the can down the road. Some of those hidden benefits that you just run through. People expect to have new functionality, new features, those type of things. An end user probably wouldn't get too excited, but put it in a support case, they go, well, actually, yeah, to have that stack set.
So the other thing that
really useful.
I expect to continue in 2022 is what I call proliferation of apps. And this is, we've got customers, Craig at Carver's, I'm thinking of you, who are going into AppSource and finding apps there by third parties and saying, this looks great for us, this would really help. We can do it. Now, finding stuff in AppSource, there is a qualification process you should go through. AppSource has got a lot of apps in it now. Not all of them are applicable to any customer, and the quality, the organization behind them. Putting an app in AppSource, I have to say, is the easy bit, and understand this 110% with my Clever Dynamics hat on, and also it's great at Directions, the recent industry conference. One of my compatriots was saying, what you need to do to keep it in AppSource, and what you need to do what you need to do to get it in AppSource, and then what you need to do to keep it in AppSource. Keeping stuff in AppSource with the rate of change from Microsoft is it's a lot of work. So I think we are seeing a maturing of that because there's a lot of work. Those apps who've got like 3 customers are suddenly realizing how much work's involved and going, you know what, we need to charge a bit more for that. So we're starting to see some price changes of what people are charging for stuff that's in there, so that it's commercially viable for them to do that. Actually, the ones that it's more commercially viable, the ones who've got traction and got a lot of users and a lot of customers out there, because
economies of scale,
the subscription adds up. And so, you're starting to see some shakeout. I think it's not very easy to take it out of AppSource. If you've got a couple of users in AppSource, you've got a whole bunch of reputational damage, if nothing else. Microsoft are going to be not happy with you for taking it out of AppSource. So once you're in there, you're stuck within there, but you can leave it in there and do very little. But actually that, as a customer, that's not what you want. So that's where I think some kind of you need to go through. What's their recent roadmap been? How many releases have they done to keep up with the changes from Microsoft? And there are some changes that you perhaps again as an end user wouldn't appreciate. So one of the big ones that's coming down the line is authentication. So third parties connecting into Business Central. Typically for, since 2009, we've used web services. And initially that was something called a SOAP web service. Like technology does, that's been, in effect, SOAP is quite a verbose, the message that goes backwards and forwards is quite big, quite very, it's XML, so it's structured XML, everything's got a start and end. You look at an XML message, it goes on for a while. That's been replaced really. A lot of modern system used to what's called REST. It's a lot more, which uses a structure called JSON. JSON's a lot more efficient in that it's smaller. It just has it understands that it needs a set of tags at the top, but then it's just rows of data. So you can say in effect the modern up-to-date equivalent of the CSV file with a line at the top describing what it is. So Microsoft are moving towards REST, the new API pages that they introduced a couple of years ago and have consistently enhanced use REST. And that works very, very, actually that's better than SOAP in Business Central. So in effect, you got a performance boost by using API. SOAP, they've discontinued SOAP pages. You can't publish a page as SOAP anymore, and I would think the writing is on the wall for the rest of SOAP at some point. Code units will disappear at some point as well. What we do know is going for definite is the web service key authentication. So again, when you were setting up that interface, typically you specified a username and you had a password key that didn't expire. That you put into your connecting system so that it could authenticate through to Business Central. That's considered to be a security hole. I think probably Microsoft are a bit more enthusiastic because it's also considered one user could. It facilitated multiplexing, you could argue, because multiple people could use that username and password that never expired to connect through and push data into Business Central. You couldn't open the web page, you had to use a third-party system, but you could push data from that third-party system. So, now Microsoft are moving, so in effect you, what's called service-to-service, S2S, as we typically tag it, authentication will be mandatory from April. That means things like people who use our Clever handheld, there's an upgrade coming for that we'll need to go through for all our SaaS customers. Again, it's part of the managed service to make sure that's in time and so on. We have that in and working, just about to publish it into AppSource. And that allows one system to talk to another. So you register the application as having permissions to talk to your Business Central system, and that works through. So customers will log into the device using their Office 365 authentication and then come back through. So the need for users within Business Central who are not part of, not Office in the Azure AD domain, they don't necessarily have to have an Office 3 subscription, but they have to be in the Azure. That really is getting very old hat. And again, you probably say in a few years' time, the writing's on the wall for that. I would speculate. I don't know that, but I would speculate, because again, the security is just a massive security hole. Usernames, passwords, with no enforced changes and all the rest of it outside the security policies, and security, as we covered 5 minutes ago in my little ramble, is there. So there are reasons for them doing it, but it's change coming down, and that change needs to be managed. So this is where it all connects together.
Okay. So we're offering those services now to help people with these changes. Obviously, for some people that sounds very technical. Listening to you talk, I know it's not from.
If you like that sort of stuff, go self-service. If you don't, we'll do it for you for managed service.
Absolutely. Okay. And as I said, we've been doing that for PaaS. It's now available for SaaS. And I think we, if you are a Tecman customer, have a chat with your account manager about any of the impact it's going to have, well, not the changes, but from the service and what we can help and get that up.
And it's where I'm always looking at Tecman and where we need to evolve. That's not for the technology's sake. It's like, what is the customer going to need from us to have a smooth, easy, straightforward experience? I think they just want to ship boxes or do whatever they do. It's our job to take care of the technology and be able to warm and be one step ahead. Hopefully more than one step ahead, but at least one step ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So those are some of the changes. I know that Microsoft are, well, you told me before we started this, that Microsoft are going to release the 2022 Wave 1. I know, it feels like we just finished talking about Wave 2. This year, Wave 1 is going to be announced at the end of January.
We thought 19 came out in October. That's now almost 3 months ago. Yeah. So, in early January, we'll start thinking about the next big one, which is March. 25th of January they release the notes for that, and I think we'll plan a podcast a day or so later when we've worked out what the hell they're talking about. Maybe.
They're always very popular. The Wave release notes when they're released on the podcast.
And we have good listening because predicting. I've always said. One of the reasons, I've always spent a lot of time talking to Microsoft. It's a huge time soak that I can't put on a timesheet. I can't send an invoice to Microsoft for my time. But why would you do that? And if you know what's coming, you can better plan. And so that's where we do a certain amount so that the guidance we can give to customers about how they spend their money. It's always gutting when a customer spends money on something that turns out to be a dead end after a relatively short space of time. You need to be able to get your money back. So by knowing better what's coming, we're able to give better advice to say, actually, you know what, you're asking for that today, but if you wait 3 months, and one of the announcements that came out of cycle is Shopify. So actually, it was Shopify, I think, that prompted this back in October, November timeframe. It was October actually. It was after the Wave 2 release, but I think a couple of weeks into it's before the Directions conference. But it was a separate announcement, and it was an announcement by Shopify. Microsoft had done an agreement with Shopify that Shopify would release. I assume into AppSource a connector from Shopify that will be certified by Shopify themselves for connection of Business Central to Shopify. So two aspects of that. I mean, one, there's 3 or 4 solutions in AppSource already by third parties who'd connected to Shopify, connected Business Central and Shopify. You do feel a little bit sorry for them because they will. I was talking to a couple of them, and one in particular, the one we probably recommended, and kind of they think they will be able to provide more functionality. They think they're more aware of what customers actually want than perhaps either Microsoft or Shopify will be. And hey, there's a good, arguably every reporting tool that's ever been sold against Business Central is doing just that. There's reporting tools in the product, but they provide something that's better enough that customers want, that they'll pay the premium for it. So I don't think those products are dead in the water, but it's probably a bit of a shock when
It's
the publisher rolls up on your lawn and parks their tank.
Some real competition there, isn't there? You're going to look at what's out the box before you, or what the publisher does before you go and look at a third party. But we've seen it before, haven't we? Where, especially when Microsoft initially released, it'll be interesting when we get the full details. I know they need to announce some of
to see what it will do. Yeah, in reality,
integration
and what are Shopify going to publish this free of charge effectively and just use it to drive potential e-commerce sites to Shopify, and they'll recover their
investment
money with your Shopify subscription. In which case it's going to be a very cheap e-commerce option, I would say, because a Shopify shop isn't expensive. No. I don't know whether there'll be a level of Shopify that you need to subscribe to have the integration. Sometimes that's how it works. I think you've seen that with multiple ones. I think Salesforce are a classic for that. You can go and get Salesforce for a very small amount of money, but as soon as you want to link it to anything else, you're up to the enterprise version, and that's £100 a month.
Yeah.
So it's car syndrome, isn't it? Where they always have a very basic, stripped back one that nobody's actually going to want to drive in the showroom, just so they can say on the adverts, from this figure. How many times they sell that car? Who knows?
That's very cynical, but yeah, I think you're probably right. Well, it'll be really interesting when we get those details, and hopefully, I think it is Q1 in 22. They're going to have that.
Yeah, they announced it Q1. So as soon as we'll for certain be firing it up, and perhaps again, future podcasts to go through that in detail, because that I think that will be interesting to a lot to say. Well, even if you're just selling off obsolete stock via a Shopify site, and you can set one up that's kind of what we call a deniable brand is a common thing that we see with customers, where they don't want to compete with their customers, so they set something up that's kind of completely different name, but actually it's shipped out of their warehouse. And if they're doing fulfillment for customers, actually to do fulfillment for your own e-commerce as well is not difficult to do. You might limit the products in it or whatever. So I can see that being a popular option, and it will be interesting to see, whether that starts to attract. It won't have the account management features in it, I fear, that the kind of things like Sana have, and some of the other common, fully integrated B2B sites have. But then again, Shopify, you can write extensions for Shopify. So how extensible is that capability going to be? Who's going to take that on? Perhaps that's where the Shopify experts in our community are going to kind of differentiate themselves over and above the standard connector.
Well, there's going to be a range of products out there for e-commerce, and I think, again, for customers, it's just to look and find what's right for them. If they've got particular needs, find the limitations that they all have, and which one fits you best, and plumb for that with them.
So I think final topic for this is subscription, because when you're talking about, one product leapfrogging another and kind of giving capability that you wish you had, that's the one thing that we're really starting to see actually is subscription gives you that capability. If you buy a perpetual license, you're always stuck with it, and nobody ever fancied throwing that in a bin. You were making a one child, for goodness sake, look at the divorce rate now. Not many people get married for life these days, let alone stick with the same software for life. So, perpetual license is till death do us part, in a way.
Or a message divorce when you want to change.
Yeah, exactly. So, but look, if a good-looking other half comes walking down and gives you the wink in AppSource and you're on subscription, you can change horses here, people. So maybe that's not a politically correct thing to say, but I'm sure I'll get told off for not being as committed. But software, you want to change. If there's something better out there, and you can change, like Shopify. Subscription gives you that option. You really should make sure that the subscription is justified for what it does today. And treat it as a rental purchase rather than a long-term investment purchase. And the other thing is, keep the records, keep the kind of description of what you use it for, so that actually, we don't have to kind of start doing analysis of process before we can change to the other product. Because often that, in terms of consulting time, is working out what you actually do rather than making the new product do it that can take the time.
Okay.
So I guess, that's so one of the innovations this year that I think will grow. So Tecman introduced an LMS. We started working with an LMS, learning management system. So online training system that we got, LMS 365. There's a small subscription for it. It's not a huge amount, but there is a cost to it. What we can do is, we've put a lot of effort this year and started to use training on standard product, and on some of the clever products as well are following that in. Now, why use that rather than just a YouTube video? Well, we can stop it every 2 or 3 minutes and we can ask a series of questions, which tends to keep the person watching it, their attention tends to be a lot more focused, shall we say, if they know that there's a question coming. I do that. I'm sure everybody else does that as well. We can monitor who's done what course. So we have in effect a schedule of, right, you did the first 11 segments of this particular topic. You've got 3 left to do. So we can provide that information. What we've started to do at the back end of the year, which I think is just going to explode in 2022, is doing customer specific ones. So blending what Business Central does as a standard with what this specific customer's process is. Okay, so rather than putting that down as a piece of paper that does gather dust, albeit they're PDFs now, it's a good job. It tends not to get looked at until something goes wrong, and then you go, oh well, actually we evolved that and we evolved that and we evolved that several times, and we never updated the documentation. You're recording what you're doing. In terms of putting stuff in the LMS, you're really running through a scenario and you're recording it, and then typically going back and putting some commentary around why you've done what you've done, and you can pause it so that your commentary can keep up with what's been recorded. Now that process is actually quite it's not a long-winded process. I would argue it's quicker to do than actually writing it in Word and have to each screenshot and then put type up a load of description between each point. Putting it in an LMS also means that when you get a new starter or somebody moves role, you can just point them at LMS and say, well, if you want this job,
here's your induction.
Here's your induction process. And we find even moving role that's useful inside a company. To somebody's got a cover for somebody's holiday, spend an hour reading through this. There's your starting point. Rather than,
and it stops a lot of the hand-me-down training where someone watches someone
Chinese whispers training.
Do it like
it's
this.
Kind of like this is the way I do it. I don't know why I do it that way, but this is the way I should be doing it. So we can document that and bring that. And I think that's I think that's going to explode.
Yeah, and at the end of those segments, I think it's nice that the user goes through that and they're told, you've passed the little quiz at the end, you know what you're doing now, and that's visible to the HR team if you're in that type of organisation. Yep. So it can be part of their personal development. It's not, you learn the product, you've had the right training, and your company know that you've done what you need to do to get there. So
and I think we're looking at. I was listening to the employment figures today, and there's less people out of work or less people actively seeking work than there is vacancies now. So you're keeping your existing people and you can throw more money at them, but actually making them believe that they're being developed and they're learning new skills and so on, and having LMS access is part of that. I think a real strong trend I expect to significantly expand in 2022.
Okay. Well, I'm really conscious of the time. I've also got to dash because I've got a booster jab. I've got to get my third booster in a minute. But there's so much happening. I mean, it's as you go into 2022, you've probably gone through 4 or 5 different things there, James.
And that's even without thinking about it, really.
So it's just, it never stops. I hope the podcast continues to allow people that don't live and breathe dynamics like we do, especially yourself, that they can at least see what's happening, see those big milestones that are coming and what they need to be aware of. So
it's our job to signpost, right?
Absolutely, that's what we're here for, and I hope it's useful to those people that are listening in today. But thank you as always. I've learned more today. I know SOAP, REST. I'm getting there on the technical side as well a little bit. So thanks for that.
So I think probably happy Christmas and a very good new year to all of the listeners and clients and out there. Have a great break if your job allows you to, and if you don't, then whichever way. Looking forward to 2022, and come talk to us, and we're looking forward to doing even better service through the next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exciting times.
I absolutely agree with that. So yeah, have a fantastic break, a fantastic Christmas, and we look forward to doing loads more in 2022. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Tecman Talks Dynamics.
Yeah.